Okay, everyone, thanks very much. We'll move to our final session. It's a great pleasure to welcome two of our friends and scholars from Exeter University, Angelique, Richardson, who's, I'm sure, well known to all of us in the Society. Angelique's Associate Professor of English at Exeter. She's published very widely on Victorian literature and culture and science, including a great deal of work, as we know, on Hardy himself. Her publications include Love and Eugenics in the late 19th century, The Women Who Did, stories, an edited collection of stories by men and women of the late 19th, early 20th centuries. And she's working on a monograph on Hardy and biology for OUP. And Helen Angear, who is a collaborative doctoral award student at Exeter and is also working here at the Dorset County Museum. And she's working on the Hardy Correspondence Archive with relation to her PhD thesis, which is Hardy's Correspondents, Proximity and Distance in Postal Communication, where she's looking at all those people who were writing to Hardy, much of which is, as I understand it, still unpublished. And Helen is also Associate Lecturer at Exeter College. Their title today is Hardy's Correspondents and the Woodlanders. Thanks very much.
Very much, Roger. It's a great pleasure to be invited here, and welcome to our talk and our workshop afterwards. So, we want to talk a little bit about the Hardy Correspondence Project. Hardy's Correspondence Project is focused on Hardy and the various people who wrote to him, with a particular emphasis on networks. It reveals Hardy engaged in social, intellectual and political debate, ranging from education, the emancipation of women, war and animal rights, and urging internationalism to challenge the idea of nationalism at a time of increasing international competition. Now, this is a collaborative project, and we're working closely with the Digital Humanities team at Exeter and with the Dorset County Museum archivists Helen Gibson and Andrew Lear. And we're going to put up now some definitions of the key terms that we'll be using in relation to this letters database. Now, the letters collection belongs to Dorset County Museum. It belongs to their Thomas Hardy archive, which was recently selected for the UNESCO UK Memory of the World Programme Register. Now, as many of you will know, all of you I think will know, while the letters from Hardy are already in print, they've been in print, most of them for some time, and the 8th volume more recently, published by Oxford University Press, and also available online since 2012 via Intellex's Past Masters. The letters that Hardy received, the 5,000 plus letters to Hardy, were largely uncatalogued and are unpublished. Now, the letters to Hardy are of vital importance, not only in and of themselves, but also in restoring dialogue and helping us to understand the construction and public perception of Hardy and his place in literary and artistic communities, and as part of a global exchange. The study also provokes reconsideration of the writer in wider culture. As we research the letters themselves, we are asking the following questions. Who wrote to Hardy, and what did they write him about? How did this change as Hardy became an increasingly successful writer and a significant international figure? And in what ways did the letters change after Hardy stopped writing novels in 1895 and focused entirely on poetry? How do the letters reflect upon Hardy's creative processes And what do they tell us about Hardy's place within literary communities? Now, it's a very rich collection of letters, as you'll see from this brief set of examples. Writers, artists, publishers, and members of political organisations all wrote to Hardy, to name just a few: J.M. Barrie, Arnold Bennett, Charlotte Mew, Sassoon, H.G. Wells, and actors: Irving, Ellen Terry, Sybil Thorndike, Irene Vanber, and artists, among whom George du Maurier and Helen Patterson, and a number of charitable and political organisations. The edition of the letters will comprise both a high-resolution digitisation and a facsimile transcription of the letters.
And today we will be drawing on examples of letters about the Woodlanders, including correspondence from Hardy's editors, his friend and critic Edmund Goss, the actress Gertrude Bugler, and that's the image that we have of Gertrude's letter there, sent on her birthday in 1925 to thank Hardy for sending a copy of the Woodlanders. And on the right there's the transcriptions, but it's just to give you an indication. You can go online afterwards and see any of the working drafts that we have, so don't worry that you can't see it as well there. But the transcriptions that we're doing they're created in Oxygen, and that's software that accommodates text encoding. So initially, a sample of 100 letters will be transcribed by September 2018. And we hope to build on this by crowdsourcing with an international community to achieve transcriptions of the whole collection. That, of course, is dependent on funding, so it's a hope for the future. But the project aims to produce this fully searchable resource to reach the widest possible audience using open, accessible technologies. And we'll be covering the period from which Hardy's earliest correspondence survives, which is his early 20s in 1860, through to the late 1920s and beyond, when the letters continue to Florence Hardy at Maxgate.
There are 3 research contexts for this project. The first one is the critical study and reception of Hardy, extending more broadly to Victorian studies and publishing history. The second is editorial practice in Victorian studies. And the third is the field of text and digital editing, which in turn is situated within a wider debate about digital scholarship in literary studies. As part of this, we aim to develop ongoing debate about digital technology and its critical relevance to the humanities in universities and in schools. Hardy's work is set on A and AS level syllabi. It's an option on the IB, and it's set at GCSE. It's taught on nearly every English degree course in the UK and US, and on some US high school curricula, and it's also increasingly popular both in mainland Europe and outside the Western world. We've been concerned in this project from the outset with thinking critically and collaboratively about the processes of editing in a digital age. Recent scholarship, notably Bernard O'Keefe and Unsworth's edited Electronic Text Editing, Deegan and Sutherland, and the special issue of Literature Compass, Scholarly Editing in the 21st Century, this scholarship has highlighted the need for new theories of text editing and an examination of what we mean now by a text. In the digital age, what defines a text? What are its boundaries? And what is the relation of electronic editions to a scholarly infrastructure shaped around the technologies of print? We take up the challenge laid down by Jerome McGann. The general field of humanities education and scholarship will not take the use of digital technology seriously until one demonstrates how its tools improve the ways we explore and explain aesthetic works, until, that is, they expand our interpretational procedures. Now, as part of this project, we considered these questions. What is the role and responsibility of the editor in the world of digital humanities scholarship? How far can the reading experience be dissociated from the physicality of the text and the assumptions implicit in print editions of a stable text? And how far can an online edition serve the needs of readers outside as well as within the academic community? More broadly, how are digital editions helping to shape and transform humanities scholarship?
And as we develop our own edition, we ask, how is digital editing different from the kinds of editing for printed editions? So the idea that digital technology changes the working methodology and the shift in medium also leads to a reconsideration of the kind of editorial product that we can produce. And we ask how our planned output will compare to the collected letters from Hardy, both the printed version and the online version in Past Masters. So Past Masters has very detailed footnotes, but the way that we're developing our version is that the transcriptions often have links and files embedded in the texts. So we have to recognise those differences.
We'd like to show you now some key features of the database with examples from letters relating to the Woodlanders, as these will be part of the 100-letter sample.
And the overall aim of the database is to build a documented schema that can support and highlight the specific characteristics of correspondence and reconstruct epistolary conversations by linking digital archives. In the test application that I mentioned, you can type Woodlanders into the search bar, and I'll go back to the link quickly. So there is the link there, and we can make that available. It is a working document, and these are just drafts, but afterwards, if you type in Woodlanders into the search bar, it'll show you 6 examples so that you can explore the letters in more detail if you'd like to, and that is online. And as we mentioned, we have a photo facsimile. So this is the second page of Gertrude Bugler's letter. And what that will be always available to you on the online edition, and it'll be accompanied by the transcription that we will do, which will have the embedded links. So with Bugler's text, she writes to thank him. We can recognise that she's sending it on her birthday, but we can also try to aim to put in this idea of the rust marks that appear on the original letter. And we have to consider that if we have a photo facsimile, it's still not the same as the original text, not the text that we have in the archive to go back to. And so it's not really about replacing, it's offering, it's, complementing and making it more accessible. But it doesn't have that materiality of looking at the old letters. What we can try and do is make sure that the colour is controlled, that the measurements are recorded, and that we're avoiding digital enhancement. So beyond the fact that you can zoom in so that you can look at the letters in more detail, we aren't changing anything to try and create the same as far as we can. And so we then have to think as well about the transcription. And as Sutherland and Priatzos ask, if you have a photo facsimile, is the expectation greater or smaller that the transcription will visually resemble what is transcribed? Our most challenging examples, and they are only a few, would be elements of cross-writing that are still appearing. We don't have anything as complicated as this one, which I've taken from another project, but we do have some, and it's quite challenging to think how we can transcribe meaningfully, but we might not be able to create the same visual effect. So that's why we need both the photograph and the transcription. With the transcriptions, what we can do is preserve paragraph and page breaks. So we have different codes that we can put in, and it's quite small, but we can show a hand shift. So So in a letter sent from Professor Berry from Cambridge, he was writing to Hardy to ask about superstition in the Woodlanders. There's obviously the red pencil that you can see in the image just on the right, and on the right corner. And we can also say that that's actually a shift in handwriting, and that it goes back to Professor Berry's handwriting for Dear Mr. Hardy. We then have the paragraph code to show where they're starting new paragraphs and how, with handwritten letters, they will go over several pages. So we can indicate that page 1 ends, but the paragraph continues on. So that's how we're trying to keep some of the same features. However, markup is also semantic. It's not just about capturing those orthographical features. And as Dino Bazzetti asks, although we have obviously tried to create as many of the features as we can, and we've got the deletions and insertions, which we can put back in. But as Dino Bazzetti asks, really, if we're providing this transcription, by providing informed interpretation, which is a transcription that's both annotated and encoded, ultimately we are transforming the text, and we do need to recognise that. So therefore, it's this critical question that Bazzetti asks: to what extent is the digital edition both an image, a representation of the text, but also textual data to be processed? And that's a key question that we ask as we create the database. So while in some ways we are transforming the original texts, in other ways what we are able to do is restore the original context in which they would have been read. What we're aiming to achieve with this project is an enhanced understanding of the connections between texts in the collection. Whereas digital editions of correspondence typically move through letters in chronological order, the Digital Humanities Department have made it possible for us to have previous and next links that keep you moving through a dialogue between Hardy and one particular correspondent, if there are a number of letters there. So the example that you can go on and look on the online database is Hardy's correspondence with Florence Henniker, because both sides of that correspondence are in the DCM archive. And so you can see that they're having a discussion about poets, film adaptation and performing animals in one letter, but then you can go to the previous letter where Hardy has started one particular topic, and they move on to the next one where they are then moving on to the topic of Hardy's marriage to Florence Dugdale. So we're really trying to kind of create the idea that you can be in the dialogue that Hardy would have had at the time. As another example, with Edmund Goss, we have 45 letters that we've photographed, and in some cases we have Hardy's replies. So we've also been able to recreate those conversations. And I particularly like the idea that Goss writes to Hardy and says that Stevenson is off to Colorado and the only text he's taking with him is the Woodlanders. So it really captures their friendship through the dialogue. But of course we don't have both sides in most cases, and so we then have to think about future projects. The ability to connect archives in digital space is facilitated through the encoding that we're doing. So other letters that Hardy sent to Goss are at the Leeds University archive, so it might be that a future project would be to actually think about digitising to link those two. And of course we have to acknowledge that the greatest online collection is Pastmasters, but we have challenges with that because there are paywalls, and if our archives and museum collections are to be street corner universities, then we must find a way to provide access to all. And so working with text encoding, TEI, and linked open data, we can do all of these sorts of things. We can look at data on people and places and build the existing archives links between ones that are already digital, and look to future projects, as we said, to enhance the discoverability of our project, but also others that may be out there. So it's really quite collaborative. And the other aspect that we're we're looking at is how we can also restore the context of epistolary conversations by restoring some of the enclosures that may have been lost or separated. So, for example, in Professor Berry's letter, he is writing about superstition and he includes the text that he's written because he wants Hardy to read it. That's no longer with the letter, but on the online database, we can put in a link, and that means that the reader now can actually see that text that was sent. So I've only got an image for you here. Once you're connected, obviously, to the internet, you'd then be able to go and flick through the pages of Romances of Chivalry on Greek Soil by Professor Berry. So it really does create this kind of sense of the context that we were looking at.
One of the major research aims of the project, and of correspondence projects in general, is the reconstruction of networks. By adding more information about individuals and their relations to groups, we'll be able to enhance the prosopographical content of more traditional scholarly editions. Through links created between the sender and the addressee, as well as internal links to different people who are referenced within the letters, it's possible to reconstruct social and cultural networks and to offer ways of visualising those.
We've just got one more example then from Berry's letter that moves on to discuss a mutual friend, Edward Clodd. And so with the text, we have green and blue links. So the green take you to files about more information about the places, and the blue links will take you to anything about a person or an organisation, and then where we think there are networks developing, then we can indicate those in those files, obviously at a working stage at the moment. And it does become more difficult because we have Hardy's fictional places. So with any place that's a real location, we can put in the geolocation. But what we'd like to ask you in the next part is kind of ideas about what you'd like for the fictional places and how we might be able to pinpoint those on a Wessex map, perhaps. So it's at a very early stage. And so we really refer to it as the modelling process, because we're establishing the kind and purpose of the edition that we would like to produce, and that's an ongoing process at the moment. So this idea of the knowledge of the project, of the object, and how that deepens, we can obviously expect that our initial model will be refined many times over, and it's really good to be able to talk to you today about it, because any kind of ideas we can hope to try and refine it in that way. And it's also beneficial because, although I'm very happy to say that almost all of the photography of over 5,000 letters is done, and thank you to Helen and Angelique as well for doing those things, but we are still ongoing with some photography. We're doing that at the same time as the transcriptions and the encoding, and how we refine the user interface, which is this exist database that you can go online and have a look at. So it's good that we're actually doing all of those concurrently, and so we can keep refining to improve what we have.
As we continue to refine the model, we ask, are recipients of a digital edition readers or users? What are the benefits and challenges of scholarly editing as a collaborative project across disciplines? And are we using the same language of scholarly editing practice? While recent years have seen some excellent online correspondence projects, from the Darwin Correspondence to the Olive Schreiner letters online, which are both freely available, there are less specific guidelines on TEI markup for correspondence, and this is another of the areas to which we hope to be able to make a significant contribution. This project should also help to develop even more precise TEI markup for the multivocality and multi-narrative nature of correspondence. So to recap, the overall aim of the database is to build a documented schema that can support and highlight the specific characteristics of correspondence. One of our wider aims is to create a dynamic community around correspondence, as well as providing scholars and students with a fully searchable edition of the letters. Thank you. So now we're going to make you do a little bit of work for us.
So yeah, there are some contact details if you want to find out more about the project itself, and that's the web address, and obviously we have Twitter as well. But we thought that we would show you up close some of the digitised letters. So I'll hand these out if you want to go through the first one, and if I give half there, would you mind passing some out? Thanks. Oh, thank you. Probably be about 1 between 2. It's been obviously a great turnout today, so I apologise if there's not enough, but just 1 between 2 ideally. And I'll also put it up on the screen just as that's coming around, but I know it's much smaller. I was going to ask if they wanted to read it through for a few minutes and then we said about them.
Does everyone yet have access to one? I don't think we've quite got one each.
No,
we thought you'd all be in Weymouth by now. But so we're very pleased you're not.
I don't think we do, unfortunately. Sorry.
Can we enlarge that slightly? So we're going to give you a few moments to read through it. If you wish to make your own transcription, please do. If there's just a few words you'd like to transcribe or you think are particularly interesting, or you are not sure how to read, please make a note of that. We'll also enlarge this image a little bit on the screen.
That's as good as I can get it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
There is an image on the screen which may be visible. What do you make of this? I mean, one of the things I find, paradoxically perhaps, for a digital project is that we are actually we read handwriting much less than we used to. So the shock of the handwritten letter in itself is something of a barrier. Did you find it easy to read? No. Yeah. And this is one of the more legible ones, isn't it, in the collection? So it's quite a struggle, actually, to
You learn the handwriting. You read 20 more letters in one.
Yes.
So you become familiar with it.
Yeah.
In the same way as Helen just say that's Emma's writing and that's Thomas's writing.
Yes.
You eventually recognise that Morris has, for example, rather a high S.
Yeah.
Letters which look rather odd. Actually just letters almost like capital letters in terms of size. So the things like that you would eventually pick up.
So that's what makes it quite difficult, it being letters to Harvey rather than from Harvey.
They're all different, yes. Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
It's very good to be able to see kind of response to these things. It's kind of thing which initiated the response to the artists of Harvey's own correspondence. Yes. Because we only have half of the dialogue, don't we? Okay, shall we go through this then?
Are we the only ones who thought that it started with "I've had to eat the Woodlanders"?
I think you may be in a minority there, but I don't know how large that minority is. I've had to cut the Woodlanders, which is, I think, a particularly good number, short at chapter 26. As it happens, a very convenient resting place, and I send you the remainder of the proof, which may be useful. You will, I am sure, not mind my giving you a gentle hint on one small matter, the affair between Miss Damson and the doctor. I am not afraid, as you may imagine, for my own morals, but we have, I fear, rather a queer public, pious Scottish souls who take offence wondrous easily. Already, in my short editorial career, I have received a round robin concerning some offence against morality that had been swelled out in our pages.
Smelled out.
Swelled.
You think swelled?
Well,
That's okay, that's good.
this is.
Smelled out by some people who are going to look at. I smell morality here.
Right.
Yeah.
That may be one of your many footnote acknowledgements, Philip. We'll
And at this point, it's good to say at this point that we can mark up ones that we think are unclear. So
Yes.
if we're not confident about a particular word, then on the online database it would actually show up that although we think this, we're open to ideas from other interpretations. So it's a good example of that.
The word way, a couple of lines below, you see it has a sharp edge first side.
Yeah.
Probably a technical term, the first down stroke on the W. But it is a sharp curvy one, it's not that in the other one. So
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Any other views? I think I agree with you, Philip.
I think the explanation was well suggested.
Yeah. No, that's great. The offence was not in the Woodlanders, by the way. It had been committed before you began. Of course, it is very annoying to have to reckon for such asses. Still, I can't help it. An editor must be commercial as well as literary, and the magazine has scarcely so abundant a sale that I can afford to disregard any section of its readers. What's he talking about? What novel's he talking about? What novel is he referring to when he talks about? No. We haven't got that far, have we?
So I brought it to you.
I mean, I've got several I think it could be, but I need to check their first
This
publication.
is a novel earlier published
Yes.
in the magazine. Well, it must be sometime between when Murray took over, which has been a fairly short career, and the start of the publication of the Woodlanders, so there can't be more than one or two to choose from. It takes about a year for a serial to get published all the way through. And if he says it's been a short editorial career, let's say 3 years at Macmillan's, I think it's probably actually, memory tells me it's rather less than that. That would only be 2 or 3 novels that actually had to go through the pages. So it shouldn't be too difficult to work out which one might. And indeed, there may be correspondence in the Macmillan archive of people writing to Macmillan saying, how dare you publish this? And it may well be that Macmillan have actually got something stored in their archive.
Well, we need to look at it, I mean, the Macmillan archives are very useful.
Was the expression before you began refer to the Woodlanders? Or before Hardy started?
Well, I'm not sure, yeah. It had been committed before you began. I think it's before you began the Woodlanders, because it says the offence was not in the Woodlanders, by the way. It had been committed before you began, but it could...
Well, if it was committed before Hardy began writing novels, his career wasn't short. It was at least 20 years. It was 17 years old. So that can't be.
So he goes on to say, when he says, it scarcely has so abundant a sale that I can afford to disregard any section of readers, he then says, so I think if you can continue not to bring the fair Miss Sook to too open shame, it would be as well. Let the human frailty be construed mild. Yours very truly, Mowbray Morris. So, this speaks very, very much to Steph Meek's paper and that level of shaping, censorship.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting because I've quoted from this in my papers and signatures from Mowbray Morris, and I was trying to find the original letter that came from, but I couldn't. I found the quotes in, I think, the Dale Kramer edition of the novel. So it's really interesting to now see this letter. It's amazing.
Are you ready for round 2? Because we do have another letter. See whether you prefer this handwriting. The handwriting of Edmund Goss. So still about the Woodlanders. But it's a 2-page one this time, and we still have got one between 2, but I'll try and distribute half as well. Thank you. So with Goss, obviously, we have both sides of some of the correspondence, so we can look at that. And I have been able to get used to his handwriting slightly more. So we'll just look through the first part of it and then to keep to time. But so, my dear Hardy, very many thanks for the gift of the Woodlanders. I was so much disgusted with the way the critics treated the mayor that I have gone in this time for an arrant piece of log-rolling. However, where there's the strike-through, I thought it was got, but if you know any other kind of suggestions for what was being struck through, so where he says the mayor, that I've gone in this time, would you agree that it's got, or any other suggestions for what was deleted? Yeah? Yeah. So I've gone in this time for an arrant piece of log rolling. I have persuaded the Saturday Review to let me notice the Woodlanders, and I've stirred up Coventry Patmore to make the same attempt with the St James's Gazette. If he succeeds, you will have, at all events, 2 conscientious reviewers. Last time, it did not seem to me that you had one. And I really have been focusing on the word conscientious in his letter, because although he seems very positive and certainly says that as Hardy's novel progresses, he warms to it and he thinks that the first part is quite stiff, but he really likes it after that. I think conscientious is a careful choice here, because when you then look at the review that Goss put in the Saturday Review, and it was anonymous, it's not quite this kind of warmth that he conveys in the letter. And where I was mentioning the fact that we can include enclosures and links, because the reviews from Patmore and Goss are available in Google Books through the critical heritage, it does mean that the reader now can actually go to those reviews and then to see what they think of Goss's actual opinion when he publishes about the Woodlanders in comparison to what he's writing to Hardy himself. And if anybody would like a copy of those reviews to carry on kind of this study, then we do have some available, so please come up at the end and you can take those reviews away, both of Patmore and Goss. Then there are any other thoughts about this particular letter and how it moves on to guessing the locations and things? I quite like that he had the ability to just ask Hardy, directly what his guesses were before he actually writes the reviews. And we'd like to be able to link in both the fictional places and the real locations. But would you find it useful as users to actually have the Wessex Map with perhaps the points where Edmund Goss is guessing were the originals and things? And do you have any other thoughts about that?
I wonder whether it would be possible to even make one of those interactive maps. I don't know what the digital tools are used for this. I know that it exists for things like Game of Thrones they made it for, and that's really stuff for Tolkien. I think it probably exists as well. And I remember in the haze of my very final PhD days, typing onto Google Maps a Hardy place name, thinking it was going to come up,
and then remembering that actually this was the real word. It didn't quite happen that way, but I think it would actually be really fascinating if something like that could be generated, where you could actually kind of trace maybe a walk that somebody, you know, if Tess walks from somewhere to somewhere, but also to have that kind of, was thought about that, but I would obviously take somebody with great digital skill to actually...
I think at least having routes marked on the map as well as the places would be extremely useful. Whichever actress plays Tess in real life is going to have just a sturdy pair of legs, because she walks miles and miles and miles.
Yes, because there's the map in the archive where he's plotted the real routes and things.
Well, if you take a map and you do actually trace the distances she walks, it is quite astonishing how
It's very helpful to have feedback like this, and any other feedback if you want to email me or Helen. And we are hoping to open this project up increasingly to volunteers through crowdsourcing, but in order to do that we'll need to apply for another stage of funding, so we'll keep you posted on that.
One of the things we're thinking of doing in the new galleries and museum is to have a map, a sort of game on a table for children to play, and other things to do with maps actually, because we think that's an interesting way of doing something active.
You put the animals in the maps as well. Can you find the pig that splits the photo? Can I suggest, in a kind of practical level, if something like this presentation and these letters were written up as something for the Hardy Journal, that's the best part of 1,000 people have a chance then to know what you're doing, and that's not just within the UK. And there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't accompany that, with a copy of a questionnaire, or with your addresses or invitations to answer particular sorts of questions and so on. So offer you the chance to do that if you would like to.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's a really good time that we've got to be able to then do that, because before we were trying to make sure that all the letters were photographed, and now it feels like we're really moving on to the next stages, so that would be a great opportunity.
If you're applying for further funding, you could actually say, look, we've already made some of this material available to this 1,000 people, or whatever number it is.
Thank you.
Have you come across any comments by Goss of what he thought of his poem being published in the Woodlanders?
Oh, well, Hardy writes to him just to let him know that he's used the poem. Goss, I haven't seen anything in their correspondence where he's kind of commenting on it, but I dare say he wrote to other friends about it, because I know at the time he obviously wasn't being recognised as the poet that he hoped he might be. So it feels to me when I read the letters, this kind of kindness that Hardy is doing, but also it does fit in very well within the novel at that time with a tweak, with one essential tweak of the pronoun. But yes, so I'll keep looking, but nothing between the two of them other than Hardy's acknowledgement. Yeah.
So on the subject of feedback that we're collecting, can I just remind you again, because this is also a study day that we're hoping to be able to repeat annually, or certainly next year and beyond, it really is helpful for us to have the evaluation form filled in. So if you haven't done that, please, if you don't have one yet, could you just take one from the back, and just takes a few seconds. That we have them held in the air at the moment to entice you to fill them in. So please do that. Feedback very much welcome. Thank you.
Well, could I just, on behalf of all of us, it's been a great insight. I think it's been a very interesting project. We're so used to, I think, looking through Hardy's letters in that wonderful edition, and we often it's hard sometimes to imagine the other side of that correspondence, which was obviously going on all the time, and in particular you shed a bit of light on the complexities of his negotiations with publishers, which were going on all the time, let alone his negotiations with Florence Henniker, which we didn't look at. So could we just thank Angelique and Helen very much for a sort of insight into this, and we look forward to further reports and progress.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Angelique and Helen, for ending our day so wonderfully.